leaders. So I guess first of all, welcome to everyone for joining us. This is the first of our series of returning back to the workplace. We've put these together, and I do need to just thank Kirsty and Stephen and Sam for working on these series. It's been a different kind of event to what we would normally be doing. So it was really important to us, and especially during this time, we've been working on how that we can really connect our community, and we've found that this is an important part of our role and our mission on caring and connecting and bringing everyone together, making our community much stronger. So today's session is designed around the issues relating to, I guess, the new normal. So the way that we're all working in this flexible environment, whether it's from our homes, whether it's, we were just saying, it's about dogs walking in and out of our offices, kids coming in and out, and as we start easing ourselves back into our office spaces, and what that looks like for people, whether it's a combination of the two workplaces, and I guess the anxiety and stress that naturally causes. So whether it's with ourselves personally, our families, and of course with our work colleagues. So I'd like to introduce the two experts that we've got joining us today from Drummond Street Services here in Geelong. So Frances McAloon, who's a senior practitioner with their family mental health area, and Julie Yu, who's a family therapist. Don't forget, we've got a chat function at the bottom of your screen. So at any time, if you want to throw a question in there, please feel free. We'd like you to be as involved as possible. And at the end of the presentation, the ladies will be able to answer those questions. So I will throw it over to Frances and Julie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheridan. Thanks for the welcome. We've also acknowledged the traditional owners of the land, so thank you for providing that acknowledgement today too. Yeah, I'm Frances from Drummond Street Services Geelong, and I'm a social worker at the service. We will talk about the service in a minute, and Julie Yo is a family therapist. So we really appreciate the opportunity from Give Where You Live to do this seminar today, because it really is just talking about what we're all going through, how we're adjusting to this return to the workplace. So we will put up the PowerPoint in a minute, and we probably ask you to keep your mute of your microphones on, and you may stop your video if you like, so we're just watching the presentation. This is really just a quick 30-minute lunchtime chat about your roles as being a worker and a parent and coming back in this return to work. And I had to change the seminar again, because even on Monday we got new instructions from Daniel Andrews. So it really is a moving feast, and that's what we're living with, that uncertainty of things changing all the time. So we've all been through a lot of this upheaval and uncertainty, and maybe even people have lost jobs or lost hours, or even businesses, and the pressures of schooling kids from home, or maybe dealing with illness or anxiety, or even losing a family member. So there's been huge upheaval happening. But there's also been amazing examples of kindness and resilience and change that families and individuals have been able to bring to work flexibly in this space. So we want to talk about how we can bring some of the good changes back into the workplace, however that looks like, whether you're still working part-time, flexibly, coming backwards and forwards from work. So we'll be talking about some strategies to maintain our emotional health and well-being as a parent and as a worker. So if we could have the slide up, the PowerPoint up.
Can you see that?
That's great, thank you. Yep, so that's where we're starting. Really looking at our role as both parents and employees. Now on the next slide, we'll talk about who we are as Drummond Street Services. So we'll have the next slide, thanks. And Julie.
Yep. So just to give you a little bit of information about Drummond Street Services. So we work under the umbrella of family mental health support. And I think the really unique thing about our service is that we don't focus on one person individually. A lot of our referrals will come from parents that might be worried about their children's mental health, or paediatricians, or we get quite a lot of referrals from schools. and we also can get self-referral, so there's no parents can refer themselves. So the child has to be a child under the age of 18, and we look at family relationships. So we know that if one person is doing too well in the family, whether that's a parent or a child, that will impact on everybody. It's not just going to impact on the person who's having a difficult time. So one of the really important roles for us at Drummond Street is to acknowledge the role of parents as the experts. So for us to be able to walk alongside parents. So we have 3 tiers to our service. We have a brief service, which is up to 6 sessions. And that might be when there is something specific to work on. Child might be having trouble sleeping or might be worried about going to camp. We have an intensive service, which is up to a year. So we can work more intensively with families, and that can look like counselling, we do parenting work, we can advocate, we arrange care team meetings. So a really important role of ours at Drummond Street is we work very systemically with families, but we also work systemically with agencies who might also be working with the young person, so that we're all working together on the same page. And we have an education part of our service, which is what we're kind of speaking to you around today. We have parenting children who worry too much seminars. When we're able to be in the same room together, we'll run seminars and groups. We're still running webinars online, and we're still working with families online. So again, I think as professionals, we've been finding new ways to work. So it's been a pretty active space for us to sit in as professionals as well, to kind of, how are we going to connect and communicate and build relationships with families when we can't actually be in the same room as them. So we've been working creatively around that. So all of our referrals are taken through our main office in Carlton, and it's quite a thorough intake. So as I mentioned earlier, we can take referrals from professionals, we can take self-referrals. Don't have to have a mental health care plan. It's a free service, there's no charge. And we also have a website that we've been posting a lot of our webinars on. So if you're wanting to have a look at any of them, you can head straight to the website.
So thanks for that, Julie. We'll jump into the topics itself. So we'll have the next slide. Thanks, Kirsty. This is what we're covering today, transitioning back to your role. Now, we do appreciate that some people have always stayed in the workplace, particularly the essential workers, and we really appreciate the amazing work that people have done in staying in their work roles and workplaces over all of this change. But we're talking about handling that anxiety and uncertainty which impacts both at work and home, because it is a changed world of work. So noticing our roles as both parents and workers shows that really, if we can show that we're managing the challenge in this uncertainty to our kids, then that really helps them to understand we can get through this together. We can't control the coronavirus or other people's behaviours, but we can look at our own behaviours and our own emotions, our own families and our own workplaces, and do what we can to cope with this uncertainty. So that might mean that seeking family support is appropriate if your family is really struggling with some of this stuff. So we encourage people to get some support when they need to. And then fourthly, we'll be talking about some strategies for emotional well-being at both work and home. So let's go to the next slide, thanks.
So we love this picture. Fran and I had a bit of a laugh about this picture because this is a picture that we use in our parenting children who worry too much. So when we talk about, children's anxiety and, they might hide under the bed because they feel safe there. So we talked about this as being quite appropriate as returning to the workplace. So we've got to come out from under the bed and we've got to come out from our homes at some stage, particularly for those of us who have been working at home for long periods of time. And I know for myself, what this has really taught me is how adaptable we are as human beings, and how when we were told that we were going to have to be working from home, I said to Francis, no, I can't do that. I'm such a social being. Who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to reflect to? Who's going to listen to me rambling on and on and on? And now that I've been home for a few weeks, now I'm actually thinking, oh gosh, now I'm going to have to think about going back out there into the big wide world. So the anxiety and how quickly we can adapt as human beings. So there's that acknowledgement of this is really can be a really challenging time, and to not be hard on yourself if you are finding that you're having some worries or strong emotions about adapting back to how things were. As Frances has said, some workers have been working through the whole time, and as families, I think what this has also shown us is some families have really responded well to being at home together. Some families have connected, their relationships have strengthened. Other families have been telling us that it's been one of the toughest times that they've ever had. Stress has increased, roles have intensified, relationships have been impacted. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember a time when we were all, as a society, having to be in one space together with no kind of control over that. There was almost, we have no control over it. This is how it's got to be, and having to adapt to that. So every family is different. And I love the expression that we are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So everybody's experience will be different. So when we look at the return to work, and it's also still unknown, like Frances was saying when she wrote this webinar, even having to change things, we were looking at returning back to the office at the end of June. Now that's changed, COVID has increased, we've got more people being diagnosed. Now we're having to look at the end of July. So this is a really, really uncertain time, and uncertainty can cause anxiety. When we don't feel that we have any control over our world, that is when we can become a bit more anxious about things. And it can seep into all areas of our life, and it can seep into the workplace. So I think it's an important time for employers to actually notice and see workers as being not just someone who's coming in and doing a job, but a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, all of these roles that someone actually brings into the workplace with them. And parents' anxiety around their worry for their children. Some parents are saying to me that they're going back to work, but they still have heightened anxiety about their children and how are their children coping at school. So there's that real being able to quite openly and honestly and to be able to feel comfortable about expressing some emotion around that. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will just, the last point was about relational. So I'm talking about relations with our colleagues and our managers have shifted in a way. Well, perhaps they've seen us in our tracksuits at home. So that's shifted the way they view us. But really renegotiating those relationships when you come back into the workplace will be very different for every organisation. And we recognise that we're working in a not-for-profit, non-government organisation, very different to a big workplace, a business or a small personally owned business. So your circumstances will be really different. But where it's possible, we think it's really good if you can start having these conversations with managers or supervisors about what this return looks like, because there is a lot of planning happening for a lot of organisations about how to do this, including the really important things around the changes to the physical safety and health and hygiene of the workplace. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But having those conversations early and understanding what your organisation has planned about that, whether your role may have changed in terms of home. You may now need to be home more often for a caring responsibility or parenting responsibility. So knowing your award and the union and what is expected of you. I think for the managers, what we appreciated was our manager giving really clear updates on a regular basis, even if she said she didn't have all the answers. Things just kept changing so often that she was not always able to say how it was going to look. But I think as a workplace, we appreciated having that contact on a regular basis. So where managers are able to do that, it gives people some sense that this change is being thought about. So on an individual level, we need to know our own expectations and job role. And then on a managerial level, to be clear in communicating that to workers. And with that shift of parenting role, it may be that there is more opportunity now for fathers to have a more active parenting role, because it's become more accepted to take flexible hours, and that could really change the workplace forever. which we hope is a good thing because it really gives parents a role to be more active in their children's lives, and that can only be a good thing, we hope. Just one point at the bottom of that was in regard to checking in on working from home with those who may have not come back to the workplace at all. It's still important to keep those connections going wherever your employees are. So we know that all of this has an impact on mental health. So the next slide will just be a talk about how we deal with that and what that is.
When we look at this slide as well, one of the conversations that we have a lot in mental health is about the actual word mental health, and it can be my experience of talking to families. Mental health is one of those words that can bring a lot of judgment. It can bring a lot of shame. But when we talk about emotional well-being, it seems to be a more acceptable kind of conversation to have about emotional well-being. And we know that during this time has been a really good example of, when we talk about emotional well-being, it's on a spectrum. So we all go up and down the spectrum. So when I'll often say to parents, when you think about yourself or your children where you haven't had a good night's sleep, you've been awake, you've forgot your lunch, you went to work, forgot your lunch, you walk into the office, no one says good morning to you, that is enough. Those kind of things can put you on the spectrum of, if you're having a pretty crappy day, it can move you towards I'm moving towards, not saying that it's emotional difficulties, but it can move you along the spectrum. And what we know during this time of COVID is the importance of making sure that we are looking after our emotional well-being, and the ways that we would normally do that have been taken away from us to some extent. People who would like to go to the gym, that would find that would be a time for them to have to themselves, that's their self-care, catching up with friends, going for coffee, going to the movies. These are the kind of things that we haven't been able to do. So it's been a really difficult time to practice self-care if your self-care has been one of the things that has been taken away. So this is a really important time returning back to work. And I was having a conversation today around emotional intelligence. We look at emotional intelligence as being one of those things that kind of is, it just kind of comes. We have academic intelligence, do we not just have emotional intelligence? But we know with emotional intelligence, it's something that we have to learn. We either get taught it or we can teach ourselves. So the practice of mindfulness has been really important to be able to acknowledge our place, how we're feeling, how are we anxious about going back to work? What do I need to do to be able to support myself? And when we were talking to families, particularly when children were returning, when there was the remote learning, we were having conversations with parents and schools around the importance of strengthening emotional intelligence during this time rather than academic intelligence, because academic intelligence we can catch up on. Emotional intelligence isn't so easy. If our emotional intelligence slips towards and our emotional well-being, emotional difficulties, it's harder to come back from that. So the importance of emotional intelligence during this time, particularly with our children and with us, has been a really important conversation. So when we look at the spectrum, so no one sits at either end of those. If we look at someone who sits at the good, I mean, if you think about someone that is consistently happy, we would have to be thinking, what's going on here? It's not a spectrum that you can sit at the end without kind of having some worries about what might be going on. But then the other end is, if you're feeling really low in your mood, if you can't get out of bed in the morning, there could be, what's going on? Do I need some medical intervention? Do I need some support in my mental health? But we all go up and down. But if we sit at either end for too long, that can be when we might need to look at, do I need some support for myself or my children? I don't know if you want to add to that, Fran.
Yeah, no, I think it's just recognizing that all of these normal emotions we're experiencing, anxiety and anticipation and uncertainty, they're all just a range of normal emotions. And when we find that we're struggling with them and they've led us further down this end of the spectrum, then that might be a time to get some help. but it's also normalising the seeking of help around that is okay and is important to do and to recognise. So on the next slide, I'll just show that there is a couple of resources, the next 3 slides, around finding resources out there. So you might want to take a photo of these slides just to get that link there. This one is What is a Healthy Workplace by Beyond Blue and the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance. So lots of tips and information about how do we as a workplace really reflect on what our workplace is providing for ourselves and others. That positive work culture where bullying is not tolerated, where there's ability to seek support when needed, when there's really clear descriptions in what my job and role is, and where if there are changes that are going to happen to the workplace, they are communicated well. So it gives us a sense of some certainty in that workplace culture. And that's a really important one to keep reflecting on. And another way of building that positive workplace culture is managing the workloads, the stress and the communication in the workplace. So we know when things go wrong with those things, excessive workloads or really high levels of stress or badly managed communication, it really affects the whole culture of the organisation. So keeping an eye on those things will ultimately help people feel well and supported.
And I think also adding to this one, Fran, is the reality is that we are having to social distance. There are very strict rules around how we should be behaving to protect ourselves and other people. So it's also, how do you have difficult conversations with colleagues that might be pushing the boundaries or breaking social distancing rules, or and I think we're still kind of getting used to these rules. Myself, as a very busy person, I will instantly kind of people or want to kind of be close, or so it's again, how do you have those difficult conversations with your colleagues but do that in a respectful, compassionate way, but also to make sure that you're looking after yourself. So these are some quite difficult conversations that people might be having as well.
Yeah, so I know we're only touching on this today and we've only got a few more minutes to go. So we'll jump to the next slide and just show you one more thing. This is again about balancing those stresses between your home and work life. So it has become blurred, and that's okay. We've had more flexibility, but we just need to also have some boundaries, so not be completely subsumed in either work or home, and have some of the rules around switching off and giving yourselves time outside of your work role there. And yes, have those conversations with both your family and your workplace about how to live in this changed environment, practicing social distancing and hygiene. There are some good tips sheets on some of the Australian government websites about infection control and hygiene. So they're always important to look at as well. And we're recognising some gendered impacts from this, the effects on women and young people. So that's another whole webinar in itself, really. And I'm noticing the time, so I'll just jump over the next one, which is just, again, our contact details. And the last slide is finishing off there. So this is really reflecting on, we can get so busy making a living that we forget to make a life. Having that good recognition that this is a difficult time we're going through, we need to be able to keep up some of those strategies that were helpful before that we unfortunately haven't been able to do in terms of family connection or going to the movies or any of that stuff. But there will be small amounts of that to put back in, and connection with nature is one of them to help with that.
And that can be difficult, I think. Working from home is doing too much, not getting the breaks, because you are home. I think that there's this tendency to, I'm here, I'm going to get it all done, I want to get it all finished, and then that will keep going, and then you end up working more hours, and then you're not taking a break. So the importance of being able to schedule that for yourself, and whether you need a visual, whether you need a timer to make sure that you're getting up, that you're stretching, that you're taking the time to go for a walk, to get outside, because we know that all those things are really good for our mental health.
So we know that's only been a really short touching base on these issues, but thinking about how you have the conversations with your colleagues, your managers, your own family, and take your time and be kind to yourselves and others. Thanks, Sheridan.
Thank you, ladies. That was fantastic. I took quite a bit of that, and I've screenshotted a lot of those slides. I absolutely loved that one of the first comments that you made about that we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. And I'd never really thought of it that way. And it's a really, really good way of thinking about what we're all going through. So thank you both, and thank you to Drummond Street for helping us out with this. For everyone else, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And don't forget our additional workshops, which you can check out at our website, or give us a buzz if you'd like to book into any of those. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I think you're allowed now to go and have a break.
Yes,
that's
go
what
for
we
a
just
walk.
said.
Thank you.
You're allowed to
in the
go,
sunshine.
go grab the dog, go for a walk. I think it's quite sunny today. So my team, I'll see you all after everyone's been for their walks.
Thank you, Sheridan. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.